I don't know about you, but I really need Shabbat this week. 1 week ago, I was at camp. I was greeted by old friends and colleagues, happy campers, and former students who are now staff. It was beautifully familiar and at the same time a buzz with excited energy of campers still figuring out their routines and readying for the first Shabbat of the summer. The food was terrible. And I found myself complaining almost immediately about that. At the same time, I was delighted in the joyful gaggles of kids adding their voices to the happiest cacophony in the dining room. We followed the Shabbat stroll of song leaders, strumming guitars and festive singing as tears welled up in my eyes as we made our way to Shabbat dinner. There were blessings, and the room was awash in white as platters of fried chicken and shabrownies were distributed for all to enjoy. I felt myself cycling up and down, the magnificence of a huge gathering of Jewish kids celebrating Shabbat together from all over Texas and Oklahoma. The frustration that this could have been done a little bit more efficiently or differently. The sounds and antics of the campers in full display during Birkat Hamazon, the blessing after the meal, immediately followed by the table bussing procedure that turns my stomach. Up and down, up and down, up and down I went. Yes, last Shabbat was filled with that in so many ways for so many of us. Life often feels like this, and I imagine it did for our ancestors as well. This week's Torah portion, Beha'alotecha, vacillates from high to low, from high to low. It opens with God telling Moses to speak to Aaron about lighting the menorah and purifying the Levites so they are qualified for the service of the tent of meeting, the sacred and holy dwelling place of God. The portion then shifts to describing a replacement procedure for those who are unable to offer the Passover sacrifice because they were in their initial days of mourning when Passover occurred. And then we learn about the cloud covering the tabernacle and how when the cloud lifted from the tent, the ancient Israelites would set out to where the cloud settled, their movement at the command of God by way of that presence. We read of the people marching troop by troop in parade-like fashion and how the people complain bitterly about not having a variety of foods to eat. After Moses suffers a breakdown, God rains down endless quail on the ungrateful Israelites, drowning them literally in food, and then a plague descends upon the people. Racked with jealousy, Moses and Aaron gossip and speak against their brother Moses, and God appears to them in a pillar of cloud and reminds them of God's unique relationship with Moses, the only one with who he speaks peh al peh, mouth to mouth. Miriam is stricken with illness, which leads Moses to pray, El na rafana la, O God, please heal her. Up and down, up and down, up and down, from brightness and holiness to strife, struggle, and complaining, to moving forward and then being stalled, from hunger to overindulgence, from anger to compassion. It is just too much in this portion. We see the veneer cracks that give light to a recognizable humanity in our text. It isn't always pretty, but as our ancestors traverse the Midbar, the desert, the huge, open, vast, and desolate land as they strive for redemption in the promised land, life is hard and uncertain, confusing, and unfair. Many commentators share their interpretations of what's going on in this portion. Rashi offers an excuse for the ancient Israelites, suggesting they're exhausted from their first 3-day journey. They're upset and angry at Moses, who pushes them along and does not allow them to rest, so they protest and raise their voices, cranky and tired, recalling easier times when life felt more comfortable. Ramban agrees with Rashi and writes that the people have justifiable reasons for their complaints, but ultimately sees the self-centered demands as a lack of faith, and ultimately condemns the people for being fixed on their nostalgic and erroneous perceptions of the past. Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch offers a very different viewpoint. He argues that the community's suffering comes from boredom. All their needs are met. They enjoy a near-perfect experience in the desert. Every day they're given manna and water, and yet they are displeased and complain. With all their needs met, the people are frustrated, having no new goal, challenge, or mission. They begin murmuring against God and Moses. These are just 3 of the many commentaries about our portion. There are many. There is so much written about what happens to our ancestors and how they react, because in each generation we can identify with the swing of highs and lows, highs and lows, highs and lows. The reality of the human experience is that even when we know tremendous blessing, we are not shielded from hardship, struggle, and pain. And what guides us, reassures us, and ultimately keeps us moving forward is that if we look for it and are open to it, smack dab in the middle of struggle, we can find light, ritual, and the promise of God's presence. That is the message of our portion. The light of the menorah, the purification of the Levites, the cloud of God's presence, they are beacons, sources of brightness between conflict and disillusionment. So too in our lives. We find light in the people who surround us and bring kindness to our days. As Jews, we have the structure of prayer and the richness of our traditions as a source of strength and resilience and reassurance. And we have God's presence in the natural world and as manifest in the mitzvot of those around us. Light, ritual, God. The very stuff of goodness and hope. As they did for our ancestors, may they be for us the lights, highs that come before and after the lows, shoring us up and leading us towards a promised land. Shabbat Shalom.